Councilman Jumaane Williams, brother, please forgive me if I mispronounce your first name. Absolutely have been a fan of this man since I first learned of his existence during the primary. He's a councilman from Brooklyn, and he was one of the few in New York that actually gave Bernie Sanders, from what I observed, the time of day. If you recall the housing, the public housing tour Bernie Sanders did when he went to New York, Jumaane was Councilman Williams was a huge part of that, and that directly led to what we saw later on, released by the Sanders campaign, the affordable housing platform that came out of that. But he is a tireless champion of the people, of the community. Talking about Councilman Williams right now, and I believe it's been 2 weeks now. He sat down during the pledge. He stopped saying he didn't stand, and he said in a piece I read earlier that he had stopped. He hasn't said the pledge. He doesn't say the pledge like myself and many others. I mean, we may have stood out of deference, you know what I'm saying, but we don't actually say the pledge. But he was saying that, basically inspired by Colin Kaepernick's protest, he sat down. He sat down, and once that news spread, he has received and been targeted with all types of hate mail. The language I'm not going to repeat, but it's been excruciating in terms of the response to someone who has been a tireless champion of the people. And he had a statement today. He held a press conference today, and he said, it's all types of stuff that was said to him, but he said that I'll remain seated in an act of solidarity and patriotism. Well, this wasn't him. I'm sorry. This is another councilman, because what ended up happening is now there are 7 other council members who have now joined his protests in city council. So, but Councilman Brad Landers said that I'll remain seated in an act of solidarity and patriotism. He's another Democrat from Brooklyn. He said, I'm sorry if it's in any way offensive to my constituents, but surely it is far less offensive than receiving vile hate mail or being worried about whether or not your teenage son is going to come home at night. Like I said, Councilman Williams has received untold amount of vile hate mail. He's being attacked on Twitter, on social media, personally. It's not. And Councilman Antonio Reynoso said he'd also sent out the pledge until the country begins a real conversation regarding race and injustice. Another Democrat from Brooklyn. He said, I know we can do better. I expect better from this country. So they're just going down the list of, there are several council folks who are supporting him. Carlos Menchaca from Brooklyn, Rafael Espinal and Inez Barron, also of Brooklyn, Andy King of the Bronx, and Ruben Willis of Queens have also agreed to support and stand with Councilman Williams. Well, rather sit with Councilman Williams in this protest. But it's interesting as we're seeing this, because one of the things I've said, like, okay, yeah, people are raising the fist or whatever. I'm gonna admit, I was initially dismissive, because it's like, okay, great, everyone's protesting, big deal. But to see the spread, to see people willing to take a stand and put their reputation on the line for what they believe in, it's contagious. It's a beautiful thing. But these are people who are actually committed to their actual communities. These are public servants. These are people who are actually already engaging and doing the work and committed to doing even more and going even further, who are committed to leading by example, right? And not just paying lip service in their words. And since following Councilman Williams, since looking, at him during the primary race and stuff, just to see the type of person and character that he is. Like we talk about, why am I talking about this in Race in America? Because, this is a Black man, and I could not tell, but in the picture that I saw when he sat down, it looked like he was in prayer position. I do not know if he is Muslim, but it looks, from what I've seen, when I've observed my stepfather praying before. So I don't know if that's an element of the hate and intolerance that he's received as well. I could be incorrect there. Don't hold me to that. That is an observation I saw from a photo. But when we have people who are willing, the language that's being used at Colin, for example, right? The language that's being used at Councilman Williams and others who decide to take a stand and raise their voices. I saw a tweet from Bill Mayer. I guess he's upset because of things Colin had to say regarding Hillary Clinton. And it was very, it wasn't just hateful and dismissive. It was like peak, liberal white supremacy gone wrong. How can a liberal be a white supremacist? I mean, white supremacy is not beholden unto any type of personal ideology. Is just in the fact that, you white, so you think you know better and you're going to impose your judgment on everybody else. So I do think that there is a need to have a conversation. It's not an easy conversation. It's a painful conversation. And it doesn't have to be a conversation like, well, you white, you wrong. But we do have to have a very real conversation of race in America and how different, similar situated people have very different experiences. And you can say, well, everybody has different experiences, Anoa, but there are commonalities that we experience on the basis of race that are not just general, everybody experiences differences. I mean, like I've said before, we have issues with race being just ingrained and entrenched in the fiber and fabric of every aspect of American life. And it's impossible to continue to ignore the way hatred on the basis of race, and might not be overtly hatred, but it's definitely ingrained in the socialization that people have undergone in this country. Is definitely ingrained in the way organizations, the way government agencies have been acting. When you look at the old policies of the Federal Highway Administration, not Federal Highway Administration, sorry, the Federal Housing, got my acronyms mixed up, Federal Housing Administration, with the way that segregation was actually incentivized by the federal government in many areas. When you had the building of new housing and you had the creation of the suburbs, they were white-only communities. And these were funded and supported by the federal government. These were GI dollars being put to work. I mean, you look at the practice of redlining. You look at people who might have lived in integrated communities at one point in time in the earlier part of last century, but when you had the creation and formulation of the Federal Housing Authority, if you were in certain neighborhoods, you could not get funds. So it forced people to leave those avenues and enclaves that they were maybe already a part of and comfortable with, because you otherwise could not get funds to do so. We've seen this happen with education. We've seen this happen in so many different areas, and it continues to happen. It may not be as blatant as it once was, but it continues to happen because these policies, these procedures, these attributes of these organizations, of these agencies has not changed. These people were trained by the same, it has not changed. Nothing has been done to atone, to address. I mean, we ain't even had no truth and reconciliation like they did in South Africa. Not that made everything any better, but at least, you get it all out there and on the record. We haven't even had that much happen. So there's still, when we come forward to today, we talk about not just the police violence issue, even though that is a huge issue. When we talk about disparities, there was a piece earlier today about how even preschool teachers do have inherent biases and treat Black and white children differently at the preschool level. And this piece was talking about how they have to work to overcome their implicit biases, because they were looking at how, Black youth are exponentially more likely to be suspended, right? Who the hell suspends a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old? What are you suspending them for? Not laying down at nap time? There was another piece, I think, I talked about this a little bit last night, the ACLU and youth, incarcerated youth being overly put in solitary confinement for extended periods of time for minor issues. Like the one young lady in one piece, she talked too loud. Not that she was, screaming, yelling, doing anything, divisive or violent or whatever. She spoke in a voice too loud. Someone else was singing when they were supposed to be quiet. And for that, they were in solitary confinement for extended periods of time. These are issues that are disproportionately borne out on people of color generally and on Black people particularly. And it's a problem. You can trace a lot of these policies, programs, and methods of dealing with folks back to a certain time and certain era, and that has yet to be addressed. And it must be addressed going forward. We cannot have not just another election cycle where it's like, oh yes, I love the Black people kissing babies. Let me get Pusha T to come and tell you people about let me get Mary J to come sing a song for me. No, we need better. It's not that we need better, we demand better. But we also have to be comfortable. And it's not just, we have to be comfortable. If you are a quote unquote white ally, someone who identifies and wants to help, look into organizations like Surge. Like I was talking with a friend of mine, she was talking about how, she didn't feel necessarily welcome at a local organization that was trying to work with certain issues. I told her, I said, you should look and see if there's a Surge chapter. Surge is standing up for racial justice, I got to look it up real quick because I could be butchering that acronym. But SURGE is basically a white-led organization for racial justice. And we need people to create chapters. We need people, we do need people to make a change and organize where they are and with who they're with. And SURGE actually showing up, standing up, showing up for racial justice. It's a national network of groups and individuals organizing white people for racial justice through community organizing, mobilizing, education. I absolutely encourage people to reach out and find out more, see if there's a chapter in your area. If not, consider starting one. We need people to handle this conversation and fight where they are, where it applies to them.